Hello, hello.
Hi.
It's publication day. I'm so
Indeed it
excited.
is.
I
Me
love
too.
publication days. I get to see, some authors who normally can't do live streaming because they have day jobs or their schedules don't allow it. But like today's the day to celebrate them. In this case, Chantal. Would you like to introduce yourself to anyone who might not know you? The people in chat know you. Who are active in chat, but maybe someone will be watching on replay. Maybe there are people who are lurking. But yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Are
So I am Chantal Gadoury, and I am the author of the first book, Until the Last Page, and now the sequel, Beyond Ever After. Yes, and I have my copies as well. Um, uh, and I am a fairy tale retelling romance preferred author, though, it's always fun to kind of dive into other things, but definitely a romance author. So if you like romance, I am your author.
Yes, yes. And, you had been published with a different book publisher first and reached Amazon bestseller list status with those titles. We may one day republish those, but I was so excited when you pitched me this through a Twitter pitch contest.
Yeah.
And then I was like, so is there a second book? And you're like, there can be. And I'm just so happy that you didn't shut that down because I think this ended in a great way, but you left the door open, literally,
Yeah.
to more possibilities. And it just got me so excited for what could happen next. And speaking of that open door, under the desk jacket for both books is beautiful, beautiful art by the artist who also did the maps. The map is different in each book to go along with the adventures that happen in the book. But if you look at the actual case of book 2, it's an open door.
Yeah.
Not
Open door.
spoilers for book 1. I will not be explaining this at all. But since we are talking about book 2, there might be some minor spoilers for book 1. We will try our best to avoid that. But for anyone who somehow missed this magical book the first time around, because it is a sequential series, you do need to read book 1 to really understand book 2. It's not even like, oh, it's a standalone, but reading the first one will give you more understanding. It's you need to read book 1 and then you read book 2.
Yeah.
So for anyone who missed book 1, we have a book description on our website and it's on all retailers. But if you'd like to give a short pitch, or I can, about what this is, I did to Inimitable Books author Kate Kavanaugh yesterday because I was like, have you read it yet? I think you'd really like it. She's like, I haven't had time, but it sounds amazing based on what you're saying. So, how would you convince others to read this?
Well, the several times that I'm asked about, well, what is your book about? When I tell someone that I am a published author, I always start with, it's about a girl who literally gets sucked into a book of fairy tales, and she crash lands on a very snarky talking frog prince, and
Literally
together,
Frog
like
Prince.
literally on, and he holds it against her for a long time. And they travel through different fairy tales because she's stuck in a book. So that would mean that there are fairy tales that they have to sort of travel through. And you experience, I think it's about 3 or 4 different fairy tales with the main character, Jo, or Josephine,
Yes.
and Aneurin, who is the frog prince. And he is trying to find his kiss of true love because he is the frog prince and he wants to break his spell. And Jo just wants to go home. So it's kind of like a Wizard of Oz, Page Master, Once Upon a Time, with the wit and banter of the Princess Bride. Like,
Yes.
Wesley was just such an inspiration for Aneurin. And it's like a fun rom-com just set in a fairy tale setting, and you have to see what happens if Aneurin finds his princess or gets his kiss, and if Jo gets to go home, or what sort of
If the
happens.
princess and the kiss are mutually exclusive, then, just,
Yeah.
oh, I love this book so much. And so did other people. We've got so many lovely quotes. And then we got it for book 2 as well, which made me so excited because getting blurbs for our titles is a pain in the butt. And most of the time it's because of schedules. But I was like, Chantal, can we get book 2 ready? Like as fast as possible. Because the people who blurb book 1, I'm sure are busy, but it would be awesome if we could get them to blurb book 2 to be like, oh, the story continues, and be as excited about it as I am and you are. And they really were. So I'll read one from here. We have in Until the Last Page, Gadoury has penned such a fun twist on the fairy tales we all know and love with witty banter and adventure. This is a page turner. That quote is from Roan Award-winning author Casey Bond. And then we have on the back here, we have so many good quotes to pick from. I think I'll go with this one. Chantal Gadoury delivers Disney-like magic with clever twists and playful adventures that's light, charming, and endlessly entertaining, from Shelby Nicole, author of Grove Hollow. But then for continuity, we got 2 quotes from Alice Murray, who is a 3-time international best-selling author and screenwriter. Like, what a get. And for book 1, she says, humor, heart, and hijinks perfect for fans of The Princess Bride, as you said. And for book 2, she said, another delight from Chantal Gadoury. So,
yeah,
so proud of you. I'm just so freaking proud of you.
Thank you.
So you described book 1. In a nutshell, would you like to describe book 2?
Oh, I will try without giving too much away.
Because I've been doing it left and right for the social media assistant to write all the captions for today.
Well, it's a continuation of Jo and Aneurin's adventures together, or challenges and obstacles, because Until the Last Page is riddled with challenges and obstacles and falling down from things.
But it also has its challenges and obstacles.
Yes. So there is a royal wedding. There are men in sweatpants. There are familiar characters that you've seen in book 1 that you will revisit again in book 2, but there's new characters as well. There's definitely pizza. There's mirrors and disguises and some worn out dancing shoes, I guess, is sort of like, it's not necessarily a real summary of the book, but those are just like some things you'll experience. Yeah.
There's some curses or spells, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
There's
a fairy. There's
an actual fairy this time. There's new fairy tales to the characters. Not in the sense that Jo is like, I have no idea what this fairy tale is, but that weren't in book 1. But I would say, you mentioned all the elements, but for people who are like, how does this come together? Because I haven't yet read the book. I would say that, Jo thought the story was over, even if she maybe didn't want it to be at the end of this book. And she's drawn back in to fairy tale shenanigans, the help of some fairy magic, and to save another prince. Because princes just, they need saving left and right. They don't know what they're doing, do they? And she gets the help of maybe some old friends to defeat perhaps an old enemy that they thought vanquished, and also figuring out what happens after what is supposed to be happily ever after.
Yeah.
Hey, beyond ever after. Like what
You
happened?
summarized that so well. Yes.
You're welcome. It's kind of my job, but
Yeah.
I love it. So would you like to read? I actually think you read part of the prologue for the cover reveal.
I think I
I'm
did.
wondering if you would want to read. I don't want you to read the first chapter because that definitely spoils the first book.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
But let me see. I think there's something in chapter 2 that you could do without being too spoilery. You have the print book, so I can just give you the pages.
I know when I was asked a few times to share little excerpts from the book, I found it very challenging to find something that was still enticing but not spoilery, because it's book 2 just starts right where book 1 left off, and
Which I love.
it literally right at the open door of the ending of the book 1. So it was a little hard to find things that wouldn't spoil the book right away, but would still be like, ooh, what's that about? So
I think being in the new fairy tale,
okay.
I think this is chapter 2, if I remember correctly, on page 34.
Okay.
And if you want to read until the bottom of page 38, and if at any point you want me to take over because your throat and voice need a break,
Okay.
just tag me in.
All right. So this is a chapter that is in Josephine's point of view. And that is actually maybe a little hint or a little like tidbit that there are other points of views, not a lot, but you will experience a little bit more of the story through other lenses that aren't just Josephine's in book 2. So that's an exciting new.
And especially if you get the hardcover, which has an exclusive bonus chapter, which is also from a different point of view.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yes. Okay, so Josephine. A low, pained groan startled me awake. This time I knew the sound didn't belong to me. My heart throbbed, a deep pulsing ache radiating from my skull. I winced as I pressed my fingers to my forehead, sucking in a breath as the sharp sting. It felt as though I'd collided headfirst into a solid rock. By the flat surface beneath me, maybe I had. I swallowed against the nausea curling in my stomach and forced out a whisper. Aneurin? My voice was hoarse, barely more than a breath, but I reached out blindly on either side of me, desperate to find him. Panic prickled my skin until my fingers brushed against warmth. A wave of relief flooded through me as I grasped the fabric of his t-shirt. He was here, and he was breathing. Another groan slipped from his lips, rough and pained, followed by a muttered, "God's teeth." His voice, thick and with discomfort, was enough to make my lips twitch despite the pain. Of course, even half conscious, he still found a way to curse like a prince. I blinked through the haze, clouding my vision, willing my eyes to focus. The first thing I registered was the flickering glow of torchlight, casting long shadows against towering stone walls. A castle. We were in a castle. I sucked in a breath and forced myself upright, wincing as pain flared across my spine. My tailbone was going to hate me for days. The stone floor beneath me was ice cold. Its uneven surface pressed sharply against my palms as I braced myself against it. Beside me, Aneurin groaned, rubbing his temple before pushing himself onto his elbows as well. Even in the dim light, I could see the sharp crease of irritation between his brows. "Tell me," he muttered, voice rough, "why must our falls always be so dramatic?" I let out a breathy laugh, though even that hurt. "Wouldn't you say we've been lucky until now? We've landed in ponds, on a pile of straw." "True," Aneurin pressed his lips into a thin line. "I suppose it could have been worse." He murmured as his gaze swept across the corridor. "I don't suppose you recognize where we are." I shook my head. A castle doesn't exactly narrow things down for me. At least I knew where we weren't. There would be no repeats of the child-eating witch here. He exhaled, shifting uncomfortably. Right. Well, sitting here in the hall isn't the wisest of choices. Aneurin slowly rose to his feet, dusting off his gray sweatpants, as if that would make them look any less out of place, especially dressed like this. I glanced down at my bare legs, feeling the cool air prickling my skin. My modern t-shirt wasn't much better. Aneurin at least had the advantage of long pants, but his modern clothes were just out of place here as mine. My eyes moved to my hands, only to realize that the ring I'd just slipped on was gone. Aneurin, I said, lifting my hand to expose the missing jewelry. It disappeared. Aneurin looked at his now bare hand, his brow furrowed. I don't understand. Was it just to get us into the book? I asked. But how would she have known? She's a fairy, Aneurin replied with a slight shrug, as though that should have been explanation enough. I guess it had to be. He turned his attention back to the corridor, his eyes scanning for movement. We need to find someone's chamber. Yeah. We need to find someone's chamber. If we're lucky, we can steal something less suspicious. Stealing? Not very noble of you, I muttered, though I didn't exactly have a better plan. He shot me a wiry look, but didn't bother to defend himself. Unless you'd rather explain why we're dressed like this? It's not like I don't have some practice, I replied with a smirk. I recall the southern lands being explanation enough once. I could still hear the echo of his voice calling me peasant during our first meeting. Aneurin rolled his eyes before taking a step forward. Just as I began to follow, a noise echoed down the hall, a soft shuffle of movement followed by the distant creak of a door. We both froze in place. Aneurin's hand was on my arm in an instant, his grip firm but careful. Move, he murmured. He didn't need to tell me twice. Heart pounding, I followed as he pulled me toward the nearest doorway, slipping into the shadows before anyone could see us. We pressed into a narrow alcove. The stone wall was cold against my back. Aneurin shifted beside me, his arm brushing against mine. His body heat was a stark contrast to the chill seeping through the stone. My breath hitched, but not from the hurried footsteps beyond or the low voices carrying through the corridor. No, it was because he was so close to me. My thoughts betrayed me, dragging me back to the last time we stood this close to each other, at my front door, where there hadn't been a wall between us. When there had only been his hands on my face, his lips on mine, the weight of something unspoken pressed into my chest. I swallowed hard, shoving the memory down, locking it away before it could pull me under. The dim torchlight flickered, dancing shadows over Aneurin's face as he angled his head towards the corridor. He was listening, but all I could hear was the hammering of my pulse. Footsteps passed. Left a mess in the kitchens again. Honestly, he's worse than the common beggar. Hush, if he hears you, you'll regret it. Just be grateful you're not the one serving in the throne room today. The voices faded, their meaning lost behind the roar in my ears. Aneurin turned his head, and suddenly we weren't just pressed into the alcove. We were facing each other, mere inches apart. His gaze flicked down to mine, unreadable in the low light. If I moved even slightly, if he just tilted a little closer, we would kiss. I exhaled, forcing my voice to be steady. What do you think that was about? Something shifted in his expression, something quick and fleeting, as though he were remembering himself before he looked back down the hall. I'm not quite sure, he murmured. As he stepped back, the space between us seemed to hum like something unspoken. But he didn't comment on it, didn't even look at me again. Instead, his gaze settled on the door across the corridor. But before we go looking, he
Stop
continued.
there if we want.
Okay.
Because like the extra page would have been good, but also I'm like, let's just tease them. Let's I'm like, I think I picked out a longer section than we needed because that's exciting. You're in a fairy
Yeah,
tale, you don't know which one it is. Of course, you have castle staff complaining about the stupid royals.
of course.
Um, Okay, so continue asking your questions in the chat. Regina already has one, which is great, but I have a few as well. You mentioned that this book has more than one point of view. If you want to say who one of the others is, you can. But at minimum, what was it like writing from another point of view? Had you done that in previous books? Had you ever considered doing book one that way? Like, what was the experience like for you?
It felt really natural to start the story off in a different point of view. because it just felt like the story needed to start from a different person. And I guess like the spoiler is that it's one of the point of views is Aneurin, which I think is kind of expected, given that he is one of the main characters. So a fun little tidbit, I guess, of where I drew that inspiration. So back in the day when I wrote on Tumblr as different Disney characters, I actually had an account as writing as the Beast from Beauty and the Beast, and the face character was actually the actor of Aneurin Barnard, who stars in The White Queen and in lots of other films, which is where the name Aneurin came from, because I just loved that name. And I really love the actor. He's just so talented. So I took that point of view of Beast and my character that I developed with him, and thought, well, I know it's not exactly Aneurin, but let me make this be Aneurin. So I kind of tapped into that male perspective that's not really male, because I'm not, I don't identify as a male individual. However, this is what I would imagine this man is thinking and reacting and feeling. So was it challenging? Yes, because I don't necessarily think the same way that Aneurin does. I think he can kind of be a stuck-up prince at points in his life, but he is really compelling. He feels a lot of things. He just ticks in a different way than Josephine does, and I found that to be a bit of a challenge, but a fun one.
Sorry, forgot I muted for a second. I think the most important thing about a point of view is to get the feelings and thoughts of a character. And it's not always about gender. Like, we're not always
Right.
thinking about our gender. We're thinking about what's happening, how we're reacting, probably catastrophizing about the future, like, all these things. I think you do a really good job of being in his head. So you should give yourself more credit.
Well, thank you. I did enjoy being in his shoes and being in his head and exploring what that was. And I think it would have been so interesting to have been able to incorporate more of those points of views, but it didn't feel like the story where what was happening allowed it or needed it. So if it wasn't necessary to be out of Josephine's head, because I think sometimes having different points of views all the time, like spacing out between chapters, can be a little jarring. I think some books do it super well, but sometimes it's not necessary, and I didn't want my book to be that example of it being unnecessary.
I think also, it is a romance. And normally, if you're going to have multiple point of views in the romance, it's really just the people in the romance. Now, yours happens to be a monogamous couple, so we have two. I'm sure if there were a throuple book out there, I'd be like, why do we only have two and not the third? But it makes sense to have these two. And I think you balanced it really well. Whenever I get a book that is multiple points of view and I'm reading the story, I think I sometimes have the expectation of, oh, we'll alternate every time, but sometimes that's not what the story needs. So I think there are a few cases in your book where we might do like Josephine, or Aneurin, but it works. And I think there might have been a time in editing where I was like, can we make it alternating? And then I was like, nope, you know what? I take that back. That you did it better because it has to serve the story. Not some arbitrary, like, oh, when it's in the contents list in the ebook version for it to say prologue, Aneurin, Josephine, or Josephine, Aneurin, whatever order it is, because it just needs to be what's best. But speaking of, stories, organization, and things like that, I'm going to go with Regina's first question of how difficult was it to find fairy tales for the second book? Because we mentioned that we've returned to some previous characters, which implies we return to some other fairy tales. But that's not all there is. Also, those characters might or might not learn what it's like to jump stories. But, we crash land yet again in a new fairy tale, in what you read. You don't necessarily have to say what that one is, but, I think in book one, you have her reading through some of the options. She obviously does say, I think, the Frog Prince or the Frog King, before she ends up falling into that one unintentionally. But, you obviously didn't list everything that was in your imagined fairy tale book because there are so many collections, even the Brothers Grimm ones, there are abridged versions, there are collections that don't have all of them. There are, we are mainly going with the Grimm ones, but if you were to pick up a Charles Perrault book, that would have different versions, maybe even fully different stories. So what drew you to the ones that you put into book two?
Well, I do have a tome of Grimm Brothers fairy tales, and when you approached me about a sequel, I thought, okay, I better think of some other fairy tales that they could jump. And just like book one, my mom was really involved in book one with me. She would help me figure out like how to I'm trying not to spoil things, but like she just helped me navigate certain like heights and widths of like ovens and what snarky things that a frog could say that would just be very quick.
There is a gingerbread house on book one.
Like, yes. So she was very involved in book one, and it was really special to me. And so with book two, I sat down with her and I was like, okay, here's what I want to do. Here's some of the fairy tales that I found. Like, I'm just going through the literal book. And I had just read or experienced a fairy tale in that book that I had never read before. And I was like, oh, I want to stick that in here because no one really knows about it. And I could probably get away with a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more development to the story. And if some things switch, it's no big deal. We can have some fun with it versus maybe something that's a little bit more solid and well-known. People have a lot of feelings about it, myself included, when it comes to fairy tales that are very well loved and very well known. So I just kind of picked them out and tried to put them together like a puzzle. I think I had like 6 or 7 different ones that I had listed on a piece of paper, and realized that would be way too many, and there needed to be a reason for them to be traveling through these stories. And I was excited to figure out a way to incorporate at least one of the fairy tales that we experienced in book one to revisit in book two, and it made sense.
I think that goes perfectly into this question of, were there any that you wanted or tried to put in that didn't end up in the final story? I don't know if you looked at your list and was like, and immediately crossed out ones, like without even writing them, or if you did some brainstorming or even some drafting of those and then was like, as you said, this doesn't really serve the story I'm trying to tell, or it would get too, meandering.
Yeah. Well, there was one that had been on the chopping block, and I know that you actually helped me incorporate it back into the story.
I got so excited. I was like, please don't take it out. I like where you're going with it. I just think it needs some tweaking.
Yeah, I was really unsure. So to answer the question, yes, there were stories that I tried and wanted to, and then there were times where I was like, I don't think this is gonna work. I'm just gonna ditch this. And then we figured out a way to keep it and for it to make sense. There's actually an additional chapter in the first book until the last page, and it's called what is it called?
Hardcover. It's not in the ebook, but it is in the hardcover.
It's called
A hairy
a
mess.
hairy situation.
A hairy situation.
And it's supposed to be it's an excerpt of like a chapter that I had wanted to write where they were visiting Rapunzel. So Rapunzel was a story that I really wanted to figure out, and originally in my first like rough drafts of the book, they did. And Aneurin and Joe like actually get pushed out of the window by the witch, and it was like a whole thing, and then it just didn't make sense. So if I could have found a way to revisit that in book 2, I probably would have, and it was on my list of like, well, maybe we can do this, even though it's like a fun little chapter in the first book where it's just, an exclusive. If this had been, this is what it could have looked like, but maybe I can do it now. But yeah, there were a few. I'm trying to think of like what they were at this point, because the ones that did end up going in,
good.
it really worked out. And there were times, again, like I said, where I just was like, I don't know if this is gonna work. I don't know if I really like this, but it's the story that ended up being.
I mean, I love the one that you were like, oh, not as many people know it. And you're like, oh, do you know it? Because I was a little bit confused at first, because I was just like, oh, I feel like I caught on to the ones in the first book rather quickly. Do we want to make it more clear? And you're like, oh, it's this one. I was like, oh, I do know that one. Okay. Like, you know what? I take it back. I like that you're dripping it out for the reader, because they might not know it. So it's like the ones who know will know when you eventually get there, and the other ones then get to experience that fairy tale more, even though you absolutely, through the shenanigans of the fairies' magic and you as the author, with them interacting with these stories, things don't maybe stay as they are as we know them in the real world, or even as Jo knows them from, because she is from the real world. But then you have another story. Again, I'll mention Dancing Shoes, which you did earlier, and not say anything more. But I think you took some creative liberty with that in a way that I really liked, because the first one proves a point, and it may include an unwanted betrothal, but it kind of is like, it's testing the relationship, regardless of what you take that to mean, readers, that has formed in book 1, and being like, what happens if there are outside forces being like, oh, like, I want you to marry someone else. And it's like, is this jealousy? Do I have the right to that jealousy? I don't think we've had a real conversation about this. Like, and I think you tested it really well, and then gave us more characters who can test our couple, maybe be allies, maybe be enemies, or at the very least, like, obstacles and antagonists. And I just really love that. But yeah, you definitely wanted to take one out, because you had written this amazing thing, and you're like, this feels so tonally different. Yeah. I should probably take it out. And I'm like, but you left a breadcrumb for how it works. Like, what if we just explored that? By the way, breadcrumb is a reference to a fairy tale that's in book 1, not in book 2. But, I was just so like, no, keep this. If you really hate it after you try it more, then like, fine, but let's keep it. But let's move on to this question, and then I have another question that can kind of piggyback off of it. So during the cover reveal stream, you had read the prologue, and then right before this live stream went live, you're like, oh, I'll read the prologue, and then I switched it up on you live. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
But would you say that this story is darker than the first book? And you can, clarify that, you can quantify that, you can be like, it's darker in some ways, but not in others. But what's your answer?
I do think it is, yes. I don't think it's as funny or as witty, like witty banter, as the first book. There was a lot of banter, and a lot of them, Joe and Aneurin, being frenemies and then friends, and they played off of each other in such a way that I could not replicate in book 2, because they were different people. now that they had experienced what they did in book one, I couldn't get them to just be so like jovial and jokey and bantery with each other, and things kind of took a serious turn. Not only for them individually as who they are as people, but then also within this friendship, relationship, their interactions with each other. It was different. And the stories are a little darker. I think that they take a turn in certain ways, but it's still fun. It's still, with the characters that they meet, they still have moments where like, oh yeah, that was a good scene. That was fun to experience. But there's a little bit more darker magic that's involved in this book.
I mean,
That's
you're talking as if, first of all, I'd like to say there is still banter.
there's still banter. It's still
I
there.
remember you sending me the draft and you're like, there's less banter in here. I don't know if I love it, which is going to lead me to asking you about whether or not you experienced book 2/sophomore slump, even though this is not the second book you've ever written, even the second book you've ever published. It might be your first sequel, if I'm correct. I don't think so.
It's not. It's my third one.
Yeah, I was like, hold on. Nope, that's wrong. As I'm saying it out loud, that sounds wrong.
Okay.
But there is banter in chapter 1, I think, where it's where does the water come from? Pipes. The towels are here and the soap and shampoo are in the shower. Am I to join you then? I do prefer my baths drawn for me. There is banter. There is banter. There's still, they have changed.
Yeah.
There's still banter. It's still a romance.
Yes, it is.
We still have that magic. I think if you had made it as dark as you're making it seem, I'd be like, okay, let's add some of that lightness back in, because it is still like in some capacity a romantic comedy,
Yes.
even though they are dealing with, as you say, darker magic that maybe affects them even more than in book 1, like more directly than in book 1. But we still have that magic. It's just different.
It's just different.
Transformed, because, as you said, that they are growing as people.
Yeah.
But yeah, how was writing this book? Because I feel like, we're talking about the process. Obviously, now we're very happy with it, but you were, I feel like I had to just keep being like, no, you're good. Like, keep going, because, I think you were very busy at the time and you hadn't expected to write this book. So maybe there was a little bit more doubt this time around. So how did you deal with that?
I think that's a very fair statement to say that I felt a lot of doubt with the book. I doubted my own ability to write it, to be very honest with you. Until the last page was like this magic experience for me. It just like came out. And while it didn't come out all at once, it did take a process of a couple of years to write it. It was still this like magical experience for me. So going into Beyond Ever After, it felt more like, okay, I have to write this book and I need it to be a replica of the magic and the happiness and the banter and the romance. And I want to feel the same way that I'm feeling, that I felt with Joe and Aneurin the first time. And I felt like I just sort of chased that feeling through the pages. And I don't know if I ever really like experienced the same magic, but I think that is very normal for books when you're writing. No writing experience is ever the same, because you're not writing the same book and you're not writing necessarily the same characters. They might have the same name and they might be the same people, but they're different. And because you're also different as an author, the things you've experienced or the things you're experiencing. And I think towards the end, I started to be like, okay, yeah, I got this. But it took a long time to sort of get comfortable into the shoes of Joe and Aneurin again. And I think even more because there had just been so much time between writing book 1, finishing book 1, getting it to you, and then and then trying to re-enter that world again with book 2. There had been some time, so I wasn't necessarily familiar with the voices. I was searching my head for them, like, where are you? Come and play with me. Let's go write. And they just were like, nah, we don't want to. Like, you don't have a
We're
choice.
doing our happy ever after, and it's like, okay, but what if someone else needs saving in there?
Yeah. So it was still a good experience. I think I learned more again about myself and the writing process, and trying to have a better balance of my life and my working life and my writing life. Like, this is important to me. Being an author and being a writer is important to me, and I need to learn to prioritize that.
I think I'm just so happy about this book.
That's
And
good. I'm so glad.
and I think readers, once they get their hands on it, and for people who pre-ordered, you can still fill out the pre-order form that is on our website, so that you can get the stickers of the characters. I don't physically have them here because I was waiting to see how many people pre-ordered before I ordered them, but they're so cute. Let me pull up the art file. Should have had this ready to go, but I didn't. So just give me a second. I'm sorry. But it's so cute. I would ask you to, like, what do you want people to get out of? I think I've asked you about book 1, back when we did the cover reveal for that, the release day live stream. But maybe what do you want people to get out of book 2 / the duology as a whole?
What do I want people to get out of it? Well, definitely enjoyment. Finding something that they can enjoy and maybe relate to. When I was writing Josephine in Until the Last Page, the first one, I was sort of trying to write a story for myself where I was giving myself permission to be able to fall in love again and sort of rediscover what that feeling is like. And then I did fall in love again, which was really lovely. So entering Beyond Ever After and feeling secure in my love and my relationship, I wanted Josephine to sort of be able to experience, like, all right, like, maybe you can come to terms with yourself and come to terms with or accept what happened to her in her previous experience and then what's happening to her now. And I don't know if it's like the love yourself, but loving yourself, accepting yourself, being who you are, being true to who you are, and allowing yourself to fall in love again if you've experienced something that was really hard. And letting people love you. I think that's the lesson that I'm sort of learning right now. Is it can be very hard to let people love you the way that they want to love you, because you're like, no, I don't need this. It's okay. I'm good. You don't need to take care of me. And
I'm looking at multiple characters in this art, and I'm like, yeah, that applies to them.
Yeah, it does. There's a lot of characters that deal with this, like, wanting to be loved, being loved, accepting themselves, coming to terms with their past. So I don't know if anyone can relate to that or would, but I'm sure I'm not the
I
only
think
person
people
in the whole
definitely
world.
can. And
But
also readers can just empathize, even if they're like, I haven't exactly been in the emotional situation. Obviously, we have not been. I almost said something, and I'm like, kind of spoilery, but like, I'm like, like, we haven't been sucked into a book of fairy tales and living them in any capacity, but we can understand what it's like to feel like a fish out of water. What does love look like? And then being like, oh, well, like, I understood it as a concept, but now that's actually happening. Like, this is scary. Is this what it is? Like, I don't know that I want this. I feel like I'm losing my mind, and like, not always in a good way, and all of these things. So
yeah,
you do a really good job. We are nearing, but not quite, to an hour. So if anyone else has any other questions, if you've asked a question before, feel free to ask another one. It is not a one question per viewer situation. But I would also ask, I think we had thrown around some ideas of like, if we wanted this to be a never ending story, not that it will be, but like, would you ever return to this world again, like in the future?
I think I'd have to have a reason to. I feel like where we are, um, it is lovely the way that it is. But yeah, I love being with Josephine and Aneurin. I love being with them and experiencing their friendship, their relationship, their like just to their togetherness. And also the other characters. I fell in love with the returning characters, which is
I
why.
did too. I did too. When I saw that, I was like, oh my God. I think I texted you. I was like, they're back. I was so
Yes.
excited.
Yes, I could not leave them alone. I There was just something about those characters in book one, in the fairy tale that Joe and Aneurin fall into, um, where there are lots of people living in a treehouse, because that does not give away a lot. So you do go back to a specific treehouse, and I fell in love with those characters. So being able to go back, so if I could go back to their world, yeah, oh my gosh, I think that would be so much fun to explore what happened to them or what happens to them, or maybe even the fairy tale story in their point of view. Like,
Yeah.
so
Never say
I,
never.
yeah, I won't say never, just not right now. But
Yeah, there's another story that you had mentioned, and I think I messaged you recently where I'm like, any news on this? Because this also excites me. But I think, do you have any other stories you'd want to retell, or would you ever be like, you know what, I've done my retelling phase. I want to move away from that. It could still be in romance, it could be in another genre. These are not concrete plans. You could change your mind. You can be like, oh, one day, and then it be sooner than we think, or like, oh, I thought this, but you know what? I'm not really vibing with it. But in your wildest imagination, what do you think you will do?
If I had a magic pen that just wrote down everything beautifully and did it really quickly, I would love to do my own retelling of Beauty and the Beast. Robin McKinley was one of my very first authors, and she introduced me to the world of fairy tale retellings. And she wrote a book called Beauty. And I'm pretty sure she also wrote a book called Rose Daughter, which they're both Beauty and the Beast retellings. And I mean, I just devoured those when I was in high school. And then there's a book called East by Edith Pateau. Pateau. I'm sorry, I'm probably not saying her name right, but she did a retelling of East of the Sun, West of the Moon. East, yeah, and that's a fairy tale retelling of, or that's like a Beauty and the Beast story. It's also like a Court of Thorns and Roses. If anyone's ever read that book and didn't think Beauty and the Beast, it's East of the Sun, West of the Moon. So in my wildest dreams, I would love to write my own Beauty and the Beast that was different from everyone else's and brought something new to the table. And if I could figure out what that new thing was, I have always wanted to write like a Phantom of the Opera, Moulin Rouge sort of book. I think that would be so cool, but
I
I
am
have
on
not.
board. I am on board. I love
I
Phantom of the Opera.
I love Phantom of the Opera. And I know that right now there is a whole thing with Phantom of the Opera books. Like Aaron Craig is coming out with a book later in September, and it's the
It was
anniversary
so
of Phantom of the
exciting
Opera.
to
And
me because I
yeah,
remember, there was a period, however, when Dreams Descend, which is, essentially a lyric from Music of the Night. There were some indie, but also more traditional Phantom retellings. And then I'm like, oh, is it coming back?
I think it's coming
Back
back.
around.
Yeah, I think it is. And I think I'll always be some sort of fairy tale retelling author. I have done contemporary before, and that served the purpose of writing about grief and the loss of my dad, and that was very therapeutic. And while there are times where I think, oh, I'd love to write a contemporary again, I'd love to do some sort of like contemporary romance, but lately the ones that I've been reading, I just have to like DNF. I just like I can't I just can't get into it, and I don't know why. So I think that right now my preference is to continue writing that way. And I'm tossing around some ideas. I'm still brainstorming my Sleepy Hollow idea. I have a Sleepy Hollow continuation story that I am looking to explore, but I've kind of done a rabbit hole of research that is now just turned into me just doing way more research than probably necessary. But I'm learning so much stuff about the American Revolution and our presidents or founding fathers and the truth behind them. And so I'm still trying to develop the world of 1790, 1791, and doing legend research into the Hudson Valley and headless horsemen's and things like that. But and that's kind of a different twist for me. I don't normally do horror, but it's gonna have some romance because it's gotta have some romance for me to enjoy. But yeah, so those are some just wild ideas, I guess, and we'll see if they actually come into anything.
Yeah, I love that. Both of those ideas got me so excited. Now I'm like, what's next as your publisher, not just your friend and a fan? But I would say that if you have not yet read this book, what are you doing? Read it, tell other people to read it, leave a review online as well. But definitely tell people in person, because that is still the best way to get people excited. When you're pitching this amazing book to them, tell them that, like all Inimitable book titles, we have extra bonus scenes in our hardcovers that are not in the ebooks or the audiobooks for titles that have that. Also, if we can get enough interest in these, maybe we can make an audiobook for these, and so it won't just be, Chantal hearing these characters' voices perfectly as she imagines them in her head, and my version in my head, but definitely with the same level of snark and witty banter and emotion that has you choking up, like all good romances do. I think if there's a romance that I read that I don't cry once with, I'm like, feels a bit hollow. And you definitely don't. I definitely feel my heartstrings being pulled in both books. There are really some heartbreaking moments, but for different reasons, and not necessarily oh, someone has their heart broken so that right. It's the only reason to cry. It's no, sometimes things are sad, but that's also where beautiful things can come from, because spoiler alert, in the first book, Jo had a broken relationship. And if that didn't happen, she wouldn't have been able to do anything else that happens in the book.
Yes.
Yeah. I would love to. We just, we gotta manifest it either through money or, a book audiobook deal. But I think, any way to make these very deserving books a success with your help, and friends and family, and these are really good for summer reading.
They are,
light, but with depth stories. And I love reading romances at all times of years, but there's something special about it in the summer where I'm like, this is relaxing, whether it's on a beach or a staycation or a hotel room, because it's just so good. And also, they don't have heat waves here like we're having in New York. Currently, my apartment is cool enough that I can wear this sweater, but, just escape into a book. Maybe not quite as literally as Jo does, but
I was just about to say that. Maybe not literally, but you could escape into one. And that's the kind of fun part of, lots of fans usually say like, oh, I have a fictional fictional boyfriend, and I wish I could fall in love with a fictional character. And it's like, well, like, this is what this is literally about, is fictional boyfriends, frogs. Sometimes it's the same thing.
Book one, page turner, ultimate comfort read, just love it. Ooh, this sounds nice.
Yeah. It's a great place to read, Audrey, for sure.
Hello, we are wrapping up, but if you have any question for Chantal about writing, book two, book one and book two, telling fairy tale retellings.
And that's Shelby, actually, who gave us a lovely quote. So I read
out your blurb earlier on the live stream. Yes. I love it.
Yes. Congrats to her too, because she just had her book release last Tuesday. So all the love for Shelby. Thank you, Shelby.
Yeah. Regina is checking on the delivery date of Beyond Ever After and Until the Last Page, because wherever she ordered from only had 2 copies left in stock. Well, hopefully they'll order more for their stock.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we'll just leave it open just in case Shelby wants to ask a question before we say goodbye. But I hope today is magical. I hope you get to celebrate your book birthday however you choose. I will be getting myself a cupcake later, even though I ate one yesterday as well. Just because, we put in a lot of work on this story, and we talked a little bit about it earlier, but also, it was maybe a little bit more laborious this time around. For you, labor of love 100%, but not quite as smooth sailing. On your end, from my point of view, I was like, this is great.
Yeah, that's good.
Great. Give me more.
That's I think, if anything, that is the key to take away, is what might have felt like a huge mountain for me. If it seems like a nice, easy sail, a nice, easy read, then that at the end of the day is so worth it to me. Sometimes I just really struggle with getting back into things. But if it means that people find joy, then my job as an author is fulfilled.
Definitely. And, if you're someone who, when you're reading a story, you don't want it to end, you now have hook to dive right into. So you can indulge in your binge reading habits if you have them like me, and then go into this one. But if you're someone who's like, nope, I want to savor each page until the last page, you can. But thank you for being here. Thank you for celebrating with us. We are so excited. We've posted on social media. Again, if you pre-ordered the book, fill out the form on our website. You can just go to inimitablebooks.com. It's right there on the front page because it's publication day. And you will get some lovely character art stickers designed by the artist who did the art under the dust jacket of our hardcovers, the maps that are the end pages of our printed books and also included in the ebooks. And yeah, we love that artist. We love our cover artist as well. She did such a good job, doing the hints of the fairy tales that are contained within, taking all the changes that Simon & Schuster asked for when they were like, can you add the series and like this tagline above the author name? And I'm just like, I'm so sorry. But I love the team that helped make these physical books, the design, our printer, but most importantly, we would not have these without you, Chantal. So congratulations. Happy book publication day. And with that, I will say goodbye, everyone.
All right, bye.
Bye.